Every year, residents of North America spend approximately $45 billion on lawn and garden care. This staggering figure represents far more than a simple expense in aesthetic maintenance. It reflects a profound transformation in our relationship with the natural world, a transformation that occurred in barely 2 generations. Subscribe and comment for more ancient videos. What once was a millennia-old alliance between humans and the plants that shared our space became a chemical war against whatever grows without permission. The modern herbicide industry, valued at tens of billions of dollars annually, built its empire on a fundamental premise: spontaneous nature is the enemy of human order. Plants that emerge without being planted, that grow without fertilizer, that persist without irrigation, were classified with a contemptuous term, weeds. The word itself encapsulates rejection. They are not plants. They are invaders. They are defects in the system. They are problems requiring chemical solutions. But this narrative is extraordinarily recent. It is barely 70 years old. To understand what we have lost, we need to look back at records of people who lived in the same geographic territory, under the same climate, with access to exactly the same plants that grow in our yards today. What we will discover is disturbing. For thousands of years, medieval families, peasants throughout Europe, and indigenous communities of North America viewed these garden problems as vital infrastructure, as the plumbing system of a house, as the electrical grid, as water distribution. These plants were not pests. They were the material foundation of survival. When archaeologists opened the stomach of the Tolund Man in 1984, they discovered the remains of what would be the last meal of a person who lived 2,400 years ago. The body, preserved in Danish bogs for more than 2 millennia, contained the remains of a complex porridge made of more than 40 different seeds and grains. What made this discovery particularly revealing was not the quantity of ingredients, but the identity of the most common component. It was not wheat. It was not barley. It was Chenopodium album, commonly known as Fat Hen, literally plump chicken. It is the same plant that today grows in your garden, that you pull out every spring, that you see as a failure of your gardening work. This was not an isolated case. Agricultural records from medieval 13th century England systematically document the mixture of fat hen seeds with wheat flour in bread production, not as emergency food, not as a substitute in times of famine, but as standard practice. Scribes clearly distinguished between bread enriched with fat hen, considered superior nutritional quality, and bread made solely with cereal. Monastic records document the deliberate cultivation of fat hen in gardens, not the tolerance of its presence, but its intentional cultivation. Anglo-Saxon medical texts, particularly the document known as the Lacnunga, written around the year 1000, list specific plants, 9 in total, as sacred for their importance to medicine and nutrition. Plantain, the low-growing plant with oval leaves that grows in every sidewalk crack in your neighborhood, occupies a prominent place on this list. The texts do not suggest that it is useful. They declare definitively that it is essential. So essential that a medieval family without access to plantain was a family vulnerable to infections, unhealed wounds, and complications during childbirth. The record does not lie. The plants we today destroy chemically were the material foundation of entire civilizations. They were not marginal notes in the medieval food system. They were central components. They were technology. They were medicine. They were security. Let us begin with the plant that appears most humble, but whose legacy is perhaps the most profound. Fat Hen, Chenopodium album, is an annual growing plant that reaches between 30 and 60 centimeters in height. Its leaves are simple, slightly dentate, pale green in color. Its flowers are small and not particularly showy. Its stem is angular. Nothing in its appearance suggests that for thousands of years it was considered one of the most valuable plants in the European world. But external characteristics deceive. A single fat hen plant produces between 50,000 and 75,000 seeds. These seeds, though tiny, approximately 1 millimeter in diameter, contain a nutritional density comparable to established cereal grains. A detailed analysis conducted in 2009 by the Department of Plant and Environmental Sciences at Copenhagen University directly compared the nutritional profile of fat hen seeds with quinoa, that modern superfood that travels from South America, that costs between $6 and $8 per pound, that has generated debates about sustainability and labor exploitation. The results were conclusive. The protein content of fat hen was practically identical to quinoa, approximately 16% by dry weight. The amino acid profile was comparable. The mineral bioavailability was similar. By all quantitative parameters, fat hen was quinoa. European quinoa. Quinoa that required no importation. Quinoa that required no payment. Quinoa that, when allowed to grow, produced reliable harvests without human intervention. What changed was not the utility of the plant. The plant did not become less nutritious. What changed was the economic structure of agriculture. When modern commercial farming systems emerged, wheat became the standard industrial crop. Wheat could be mechanized. Wheat could be centralized. Wheat could be controlled by multinational corporations. Fat hen, by contrast, is too valuable for modern systems because it is too autonomous. It requires no seed patents. It requires no fungicides. It requires no synthetic fertilizers. It simply grows. Medieval peasants did not separate fat hen from their primary grain crops. They harvested together. They ground together. They baked together. The result was bread that contained both the gluten structure of wheat and the protein density and mineral content of fat hen. It was bread superior to what we eat today, from a purely nutritional perspective, despite our modern flours being enriched with synthetic vitamins added after processing. Today, if you allow fat hen to grow in a section of your garden during summer, harvesting and allowing the seed heads to mature in August and September, you can obtain kilos of high-protein seeds that can be ground into flour or eaten as whole grain. The leaves are edible throughout the growing season, cooked like spinach, and contain more iron and protein than cultivated spinach. The plant literally grows wherever you stop trying to kill it. It is in the cracks of your gravel driveway. It is in abandoned pots. It is at the edges of your garden where the lawnmower does not reach. The herbicide industry classified it as a weed for one single and shamelessly honest reason. It competes with commercial crops for sunlight and water, not because it is useless, because it is competition. Plantain, not the banana, but Plantago major, the low-growing plant with oval leaves and parallel veins that grows in compacted earth between pavers in gravel paths, was so ubiquitous in the medieval European landscape that traveling physicians of that era called it way bread, literally the bread of roads. The name reflected geographical reality. Wherever there was a road, a path, a travel route, there was plantain. It was the first plant an injured traveler would encounter, bitten by insects or infected. It was literally beneath their feet. This ubiquity was not accidental. Plantain grows specifically in compacted earth. It thrives where other plants fail. The more trampled the ground, the better plantain grows. Medieval physicians did not need to cultivate plantain. They needed to know where to find it, and since they constantly traveled over compacted earth, they were never far from their most reliable source of medicine. The active compound in plantain leaves is aucubin, a substance that significantly accelerates cell regeneration in wounds. The leaves also contain allantoin, exactly the same compound that appears as an ingredient in commercial wound-healing creams that typically cost $12 for a small tube. A 2013 study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology tested plantain leaf extracts on wound healing in laboratory models. The extracts accelerated wound closure by 28% compared to untreated controls. The researchers confirmed both anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial activity. When you crush a fresh plantain leaf against a cut, an insect bite, or a minor wound, the plant begins working immediately. The Aucubin reduces inflammation. The Allantoin accelerates cell regeneration. Simultaneously, the plant exerts an osmotic action that draws toxic fluids from the wound. It is a tripartite action: reduce inflammation, kill bacteria, accelerate healing. This is why medieval armies carried dried plantain. Not because it was the only thing available, but because it was demonstrably effective. The Anglo-Saxon Medical Text Lacnunga lists plantain as one of 9 sacred herbs, not because it was symbolically important, but because it was tactically essential. People who walked constantly, soldiers, pilgrims, merchants, cut themselves, got wound infections, and many died from infections. Plantain reduced that mortality. It is medicine in the literal sense, an intervention that improves the probability of survival. Today, plantain grows in every sidewalk crack in North America. It is in neglected gardens. It is in abandoned pots. It is at the edges of roads. It is exactly where it was 1,000 years ago. When someone accidentally cuts themselves in your backyard, they are stepping on medicine. Literally, the plant is beneath their feet. There exists a particular seasonal phenomenon that occurs in temperate climates. As autumn arrives, gardens enter dormancy. Tomatoes stop producing. Lettuces planted in spring are finished. Grocery stores, by contrast, begin receiving increasing volumes of fresh lettuce, spinach, and other leafy greens. From where does it come? From California, from Arizona, from Mexico, from anywhere it is possible to maintain warm temperatures during winter. The produce travels thousands of kilometers in refrigerated trucks. It arrives at your refrigerator, wilted, expensive, and frequently covered with pesticides. Exactly when this is happening, when supermarket produce aisles fill with traveled lettuces, a small tender plant begins to appear in your garden beds, in abandoned pots, in spaces between pavers. That plant is Stellaria media, commonly called chickweed. You call it a weed. You pull it out. You throw it away. You spray it with herbicide. During the Middle Ages, chickweed was the primary winter vegetable, not because people were desperate, because it was genuinely excellent. The flavor is clean and gentle, something between lettuce and baby spinach, but with a subtle sweetness that commercial modern greens simply do not possess. Medieval families awaited chickweed with the same anticipation that you await strawberries in spring. It was the signal that the long winter was coming to an end. It was new food after months of preserved foods. Nutritional analysis from the plants for a future database shows that chickweed contains more vitamin C per gram than typical lettuce, along with measurable levels of calcium, magnesium, and potassium. It also contains prebiotic fiber that supports nutrient absorption in the digestive tract. The entire plant is edible: stems, leaves, and small white flowers. It can be eaten raw in salads or cooked briefly like baby spinach. What is particularly notable is the productivity. 1 square meter of chickweed produces enough leafy greens for a family meal of 4 people. When harvested by cutting upper leaves, the plant regenerates within 2 weeks. It continues producing throughout the entire winter. It requires no additional irrigation. It requires no fertilizer. It is alive when you harvest it, so it remains fresh indefinitely, unlike bagged lettuce that begins to wilt within days. Consider the mathematics. Your winter lettuce travels 2,000 kilometers in a refrigerated truck. It costs $3 per head. It wilts in your crisper drawer within a week. Chickweed grows 10 meters from your back door. It costs nothing. It remains fresh because it is still alive when you harvest it. It continues producing without anyone's help. Medieval gardeners did not have to wait for trucks to arrive from distant places. They had access to fresh vegetables throughout winter because they allowed chickweed to grow. It was not gourmet, it was food infrastructure. The dandelion, Taraxacum officinale, is so ubiquitous that we have almost stopped seeing it. It is the most present plant in the human landscape of North America. It is in every crack, in every neglected yard, at every roadside. You have passed by it millions of times without thinking about it. It is so common that invisibility is almost its definition. But it is precisely this ubiquitous presence that makes it important. Because what makes it ubiquitous is what makes it valuable. The dandelion is a nutrient miner. Its taproot penetrates deeply into the soil, frequently 15 to 25 centimeters, sometimes much deeper. As these roots grow, they break compacted earth and extract minerals from soil layers that grass roots never reach. Calcium, potassium, iron, magnesium. Minerals that have accumulated in the soil profile but are not accessible to shallow-rooted plants. When dandelion leaves die and decompose on the surface, these deep minerals are redeposited in the surface soil. The dandelion is not stealing nutrients from your lawn. It is mining nutrients from the depths and delivering them to the surface. It is a system of biological redistribution. A 2005 study by the USDA Agricultural Research Service measured the mineral content of dandelion leaves. Gram for gram, the leaves contain 535% more vitamin K than romaine lettuce, 3 times more vitamin A, twice the calcium. Along with recent research on dandelion root extract showing pro-apoptotic activity in colon cancer cells in laboratory studies, the plant emerges as potentially one of the most medicinal plants accessible in northern North America. Medieval communities understood dandelion as infrastructure. The leaves were the first fresh greens of spring, eaten raw when young, cooked when mature. The flowers were fermented into dandelion wine, one of the most common homemade beverages in medieval northern Europe. The roots were dried, roasted, and brewed as a coffee-like beverage that medieval herbalists prescribed for liver and digestion. The white latex sap from the stems was used topically to treat warts and skin growths. But the most important aspect was that the dandelion improved soil health while feeding the family. Pulling out the plant would have been like opening the plumbing in your house because you did not like the appearance of the pipes. It was not only counterproductive, but economically irrational. Today, if you allow a section of dandelions to grow unmolested, you can harvest young leaves for salads in early spring, dig roots in autumn when energy is stored underground, roast at 175 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, and brew as coffee. You will have medicinal root beverage, improved soil, and have eaten across the seasons. All from a plant that the herbicide industry has spent decades teaching you to hate. Most people who know stinging nettle have only one memory related to it: pain. A child touches the plant. It burns. They learn to avoid it. The entire relationship with nettle is built around an experience of pain and a decision to avoid. This is exactly what the herbicide industry wanted to happen. Fear of a plant is cheaper than marketing against it. It is free. It is automatic. It is transmitted from generation to generation. But medieval Europe had a completely different relationship with nettle. Medieval people ate nettle. They wore it as fiber. They built medicine around nettle. The plant was so important to daily life that 16th century records describe entire fields being managed specifically for nettle harvest. Not wild gathering, not tolerance of its presence, deliberate management of nettle as a crop. The leaves, when cooked in boiling water for just 30 seconds, completely lose their sting. What remains is a dark green vegetable with flavor similar to spinach, but earthier, more complex, more dense. The protein content of cooked nettle is extraordinary, up to 25% by dry weight. For comparison, raw spinach is approximately 3%. Kale is approximately 4%. Nothing in the supermarket produce aisle comes close. A 2016 study from the University of Innsbruck in Austria analyzed nettle leaf composition and found significant levels of iron, calcium, and magnesium alongside the high protein content. The researchers observed that nettle compares favorably to moringa, that tropical plant currently marketed as a superfood at $20 to $30 per pound in overall nutrient density. Nettle grows in rich, moist soil along fence lines near compost piles at the edges of streams. Wear gloves, harvest the top 10 centimeters of growth in spring, blanch briefly, and you have one of the most protein-dense vegetables on the planet. The superfood industry is selling you imported powder made from plants that cannot even grow in your climate. According to legend, Achilles used yarrow, Achillea millefolium, literally the milfoil of Achilles, to treat the wounds of his soldiers during the Trojan War. Regardless of whether you believe the mythology, the name stuck because yarrow's reputation as a wound treatment was indisputable for more than 2,000 years. Medieval armies carried dried yarrow the way modern soldiers carry combat bandages. The plant contains acacein, a compound that promotes blood coagulation when applied to open wounds. Fresh yarrow leaves crushed onto a bleeding cut stop bleeding faster than pressure alone. This was standard field medicine from Roman legions through the Napoleonic Wars. But yarrow was not only for emergencies. Medieval herbalists prescribed yarrow tea for fevers, digestive pain, and heavy menstrual bleeding. 12th century abbess Hildigard von Bingen documented specific yarrow preparations in her medical texts, describing specific dosages for specific conditions. A 2011 study published in Phytotherapy Research confirmed that yarrow extract demonstrates both anti-inflammatory and antispasmodic properties. The researchers found it effective at reducing smooth muscle contractions, exactly why it worked for stomach cramps and menstrual pain, just as Hildigard described 900 years earlier. Yarrow grows in dry, poor soil, roadsides, meadows, neglected lawns. It is a perennial. Once established, it returns every year, and yet it appears on the target list of most broadleaf herbicide products. Dried yarrow flowers make a simple tea. Fresh leaves can be crushed and applied directly to minor cuts. It is one of the easiest medicinal plants to identify. Finely divided feathery leaves with flat-topped clusters of white or pink flowers. It has been growing in your yard this whole time doing nothing because nobody told you what it was. Cleavers, Galium aperine, the sticky climbing plant with tiny hook-covered stems that clings to your clothes and your dog's fur, is not the most dramatic on this list. But it is the one that shows you what we actually lost. Medieval herbalists used cleavers as a lymphatic tonic, a spring cleanse that supported the body's drainage system after a long winter of heavy preserved food. The dried seeds were roasted and brewed as a coffee substitute just like dandelion root. The young stems were juiced or made into tea. The whole plant was considered essential spring medicine across England, Germany, and Scandinavia. Modern research backs this up. Cleavers contains chlorogenic acid and flavonoids that support kidney function and fluid balance. Herbalists today still prescribe it as a mild diuretic and lymphatic support, but you have to buy it dried from a specialty shop for $8 to $15 per ounce. But the real point is that cleavers is the plant that connects everything on this list, because medieval people did not have separate categories for food, medicine, soil health, and pest control. Cleavers was spring medicine, nettle was food and fiber, dandelion was food, drink, medicine, and soil repair, fat hen was grain, plantain was first aid, yarrow was surgery, chickweed was winter salad. Together, they formed a complete system that showed up uninvited, grew without help, and covered almost every basic human need: nutrition, medicine, fiber, and soil health year-round. That is what the herbicide industry erased, not just individual plants, an entire relationship between people and the land beneath their feet. Every single plant in this document is growing within 500 meters of where you are sitting right now. That is the nature of weeds. They follow people. They grow where we live, where we walk, where we build. They have been doing it for thousands of years, offering food, medicine, and material to anyone who paid attention. Medieval families did not have grocery stores or pharmacies. What they had was knowledge. They looked at the ground and saw a system, plants working together across seasons to provide what a household needed. We replaced that knowledge with a bottle of poison and a bag of fertilizer. The question is not whether these plants work. Every study, every archaeological record, every medieval text confirms they do. The question is whether we will stop killing them.